Welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everybody. I'm Logan Crawford. The Apple iPhone gets an awful lot of ink talked about, discussed, analyzed. But the phones that work on the Android operating system and an operating system made by Google are actually much more popular. In fact, 85% of the phones in the world are Android phones. Now, the European Commission considers whether Google Play is playing unfair. Let's say hello to our panel of experts. I am joined today by Bill Rosenberg, Albert Goldson, Jose Lopez, physics professor at Seton Hall University. Joining us live via Skype is Peter Willis, co-head of competition and EU law practice group. Jose, I'm going to start with you. First of all, there are two major operating systems. Explain it to the audience.
Well, there's quite a few actually. It's Android, the Apple OS, and then of course Windows or Microsoft.
Which is pretty much passé.
Which is about 2-3% of the market, and then Apple's about 20%, and like we were saying, about around 80%, over 80%, depending on what statistics you look, is Android.
And Android's so popular because it's an open platform.
It's open platform. It's basically Google gives it to all of the major manufacturers of mobile devices, smartphones, cell phones, and they get it for free, and then they're allowed to modify certain things because it's an open platform. So that's why it's so popular. I mean, think about this. If you're Samsung, do you want to spend billions of dollars having someone develop an operating system for you, or Google gives it to you for free? So that's why it's so popular.
Now, how is it that an open platform that seems very democratic would be accused of being a monopoly?
Well, it's because the market share that it has is so tremendous. I mean, when you're going to over 80% of all global mobile devices, and this is a market that's growing tremendously, people are going to start looking at you nefariously. Or, okay, are they really taking over? What's going on here? So that's what's happening in Europe. A few companies have sued that have their own apps that don't work with Android, and they're pushing this forward.
Yet Apple is completely proprietary, and you can't get an app on an Apple phone unless you have their permission, right?
Right. But Apple has a smaller share of the operating systems for mobile devices, so people aren't coming after them. And Apple is a culture. Google is not yet. It's a culture. It hasn't become what Apple has become. Apple, in my opinion, is almost like a religious cult at this stage.
It's untouchable. Let's turn to Peter Willis. Peter, a lot of analysts and business people in this country are getting tired of the EU messing with U.S. corporations. They messed with Microsoft. They sued them. Now they're suing Google. It's time for us Yankees to fight back and say, hey, develop your own operating system if you think ours is no fair. What say you, sir?
Well, I think the European Commission isn't just picking on American companies. I mean, I know it feels like your side of the Atlantic, but they will go against large European companies and Asian companies who they feel are distorting competition and restricting consumer choice, and that's the reason they're going after Google, not just because it's an American company.
Okay, and do you feel that the EU is right to scrutinize Google in this manner? Do you think they really are unfair with their Google Play Store where you buy those apps?
Well, what the European Commission is saying is that Google is dominant in search and in operating systems, licensable operating systems for smartphones. And although Google portrays itself as an open system, the particular complaint of the Commission is that in order to, as a manufacturer, in order to install Google Play onto your handset, which is, as we've just heard, essential for getting other apps onto the handset, you also have to agree to install Google Search and Google Chrome exclusively and not put other browsers or search facilities on. And so the Commission is saying this excludes further competition in search and browsing, and that's what's unfair. It's because Google is dominant. It's a near monopoly in this particular field, and that's, the Commission will go against that wherever it finds it, not just with American companies.
All right, Peter, thanks for your time. Albert, let me get you in on this conversation. What's your viewpoint on all this?
Well, the fact is that so many American technological companies are so incredibly dominant. I concur with a CEO of a major financial company with respect to their dominance, and he, quoted that no success goes unpunished. And just to give you an idea of how dominant our firms are, tech firms are, in as far as if you take the 8 largest EU technological firms, that's a market of $32 billion. Now that sounds like a lot, but let's take another perspective. You take the 8 largest European firms, and collectively they are, as far as market valuation is concerned, only 10% of Facebook and only 6% of Google. So obviously the EU is having a hissy fit and throwing these antitrust type defenses with respect to taxes, with respect to privacy laws, and even certain European firms like Spotify, the Swedish music streaming company, is quite upset about being hemmed in and is looking to establish a base in the US to get away from this sort of restriction.
Bill, and of course you feel it's the socialism that takes place in the EU that restricts innovation and development, and it's a reason why America is skyrocketing ahead when it comes to tech development, correct?
I feel a little uncomfortable. I feel like I'm getting tagged in a certain way. Look, a minor plug, I'm a professor at Drexel. Drexel was the first university in the country to mandate that all students have computers. It was in 1984. And I was actually on the selection committee, and we chose Mac over the other companies. But one of the things that we saw as this went forward is Microsoft started to give their DOS system to all of the PC companies, basically, in a sense, for free also, or very low cost. So as a result, DOS became very dominant, and Apple struggled for a really long time. And I think that's part of the reason why Apple went more to the mobile devices rather than just concentrating on PCs and desktops as well. Given that, I think the real critical issue is that if we look at Google, because of its search, really is a business application. It tells companies that you advertise through us and you get money back in return, and it controls a lot of economic activity all over the world. And I think that's what the EU is really talking about. It's really not a fair search. It's kind of like you buy a newspaper and you want to see the coupons, but the only coupons you ever see are the ones advertised by certain companies. In other browsers, you may have a more egalitarian point of view where you see anything that comes up. And I think that's really where we're talking about. The other point is that I think when we look at Androids versus Macs, Android users tend to be more techie people because you can go in and program your own phone as well. Whereas Mac or Apple products are sort of seamless between all their devices, and basically it's a process that generally works pretty well. It's also a higher cost point. So what happens is there's not one simple issue here, there are several.
Okay, let's get Peter in on the conversation one more time. Peter, so what is the next step here? The EC, the European Commission, will decide whether or not Google has been monopolistic in their practices and could sanction Google. Is that how it works?
Yep.
Yes, what the Commission did earlier this week is issue what's called a statement of objections, which is really just like a kind of charge sheet. So it's telling Google what preliminary conclusions it's reached. Google now has, in principle, 12 weeks to respond, although usually the various extensions, and put its case and defend itself. After that, there's probably a hearing, and then the Commission will issue a decision. Ultimately, the Commission has the power to impose a fine of up to 10% of worldwide turnover. Now, that's inconceivable in a case like this. I think the highest fine on a tech company so far was Intel, which was €1 billion a couple of years ago. Or, in some cases, the companies will offer commitments. So, they'll commit to license or to allow other apps onto their platform. And that's the sort of thing that happened in the Microsoft case a few years ago, for example. So you saw competing browsers being allowed onto the platform. It doesn't feel at the moment as though Google is sort of heading down that road. They're looking fairly combative. But we'll have to see sort of probably back end of this year, possibly early next year, what the outcome is going to be.
Okay, let's get Jose in on the conversation. Are you Android or Apple?
I like Android just because of the flexibility that it gives you, and Google. I mean, Google's going to fight this. I completely agree. I mean, it's potentially a $7 billion fine. So that's a humongous find. But I've always been Google, and it's sort of a revelation. Back when I started my career in science, we had all these different search engines. Microsoft had their, Yahoo had their, and it was almost impossible to find anything. You went back and forth. Google comes on the scene. I remember 2001, very clear. It comes on the scene. It's introduced to all the science geeks, the science graduate students at the time, and it was like, oh, kind of a moment, like amazing. And it's continued this. It's very consistent. 90% of all searches worldwide are done by Google. Google's become a word. You look it up in a dictionary. That's how iconic this company is.
Exactly. People actually use the term Google it. Interesting, I was thinking back before of the competition between VHS and Beta,
Right.
if you remember that.
Right.
Beta till this day is a far superior recording method, but VHS won because it was an open platform.
Right, but Google is superior and an open platform, and that's what's been amazing about it. I mean, it's used by the techiest of techiest guys and grandma, you know, who's down in Florida in a retirement home. So it's used by everyone across the board, and the way their algorithms work, the way the searches are done, I mean, it's beyond global at this point. Nobody competes when it comes to internet searches with Google.
And that's the problem. Nobody's competing. But what I find unfair, Bill, is that people could compete. If I wanted to go out there and develop on my Mac or my PC another operating system for a phone, and it worked better, I would have built a better mousetrap, and people would come knocking down my door.
That's the issue ultimately, whether or not the Android platform will eventually allow, as a compromise, others on there. And if it truly is the better search, then they'll win out. The question though really is driven by money, because Google, with its search capability, really that's where they generate all their revenues. Okay, right. So what happens is they're not going to want to give that up. Okay, so they're going to do everything they possibly can to get the click-throughs and be able to charge for the internet search capability, even though the consumer doesn't see it. When you click on a link on a computer, it's an advertisement that pops up, and some advertiser pays Google for that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Albert, I used to search on Alta Vista way back when. Right. Google came up with a better mousetrap. I mean, I used to search on Yahoo. All of these things were first. Google built a better product. So instead of suing, complaining, fighting, crying, and running to mom, build a better operating system.
Well, they, both in Europe and in China, for example, they do have nascent industries which are able to do searches. However, they just don't have the technological expertise and experience that Google has. As you mentioned before, Google is so ubiquitous. For example, you'll say, don't make a copy, make a Xerox. Or for a search, Google.
Jeep,
exactly. And eventually, Android could have serious, or Google could have serious competition in the future. Look at MySpace. Exactly. You have to Google that to find out what is MySpace. Right. Now it's Facebook.
Right.
So right now they're having their glorious moment, and in 10 years or 15 years, you might look back and say, what's an Android? Because things move so quickly nowadays that you really can't predict what's over the horizon.
Exactly, although we try. Yes. Albert Goldson, Bill Rosenberg, Jose Lopez, and Peter Willis, thanks for joining us. We have more with these gentlemen and other guests as well. When we come back, it is time to take a look at Prince's legacy and what his impact on the world will be. More on that after this.